Okay, record on this computer. That's what I want to do. Hi, everyone. This is John Hart, and I am the coordinator of Concatenation Convention, along with Professor Stephen Albie Scott, Stephen Tuckey, and Diana Agee has been so gracious to join us this year and really help promote us to everything. And she worked with us in previous years. So we're glad to have them. And then you can also see up there our guest, John McCrea. Give us a wave. Give us a wave.
Hello,
all the way
folks.
from Birmingham, England. And we're so happy to have him. I just wanted to go over etiquette real quick before we get started and kind of lay out the body of the program for everyone so they are comfortable with how we're operating. You will be muted on your microphone, and in the interest of making the programming go smoother, we're going to have people, if they have questions for John as they go along, to drop them in the chat. And if they're a simple question, they'll be asked as John is drawing, and there's the chats down there, I'm being reminded. And as John is drawing, if they're simple, we'll answer them then, but we'll also leave about 15 minutes at the end to get into some more complicated questions. And I will be keeping track of those as they come up in the chat and kind of throwing them out there throughout the whole program. Please don't try to unmute yourself because that'll kind of really detract from the program. We're going to be a very focused hour program, 45 minutes of content and a 15-minute question and answer period at the end. And John has graciously agreed to do a couple things for us. He started a drawing of Frankenstein, which you'll see in a moment, and he's going to basically complete that drawing or get very close to completing that drawing during the talk. Lots of pressure. And then at the end, he's going to do a real brief kind of tutorial on figure drawing, just a real quick gestural figure drawing, and then all this content will be recorded and placed on our Facebook page and also curated at our website, which is jacksonconcon.org. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. This is the kickoff event for Concatenation Convention this year. Our theme is reanimation. And we also are going to be calling it the Slow Con this year because we're starting now, and then we'll have content appearing in January, February, March, and April. We'll have a calendar available soon, probably the beginning of November, with our complete list of events. So we would welcome everyone to come. Just want to be right quick before we start, name our partners. Of course, Jackson College, the Raven Chair of Math, the Dungy Chair of Science, and then we have Nostalgia Inc., Throat Punch, Ye Old Thrill Punch Games, and we have the Jackson District Library supporting us. So we want to tell our sponsors, thank you so much. We are only here because we can work as a collaborating group. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and have John, we're going to talk a little bit with John before he gets started drawing, have him introduce himself, and then we are going to go straight into the drawing portion. So let's flip it over to John. Hi, John.
Hello, everyone. Hey, how's it going?
Good.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to ConCon and being part of the first event. I'm John McCrea, and I draw. Yes, I love this shirt too. I wonder where I got it. So, I draw for Marvel and DC, Image, and various other comic companies, 2000 AD. And have been doing so for over 30 years, I guess. So that's really my background. Professional illustrator, I suppose I call it.
Yeah, and you've done commercial work too, like publishing house stuff, and
yeah, I do that as well to keep the wolf from the door, really, more than anything else. It's I didn't start drawing so that I could design cereal packet stuff or what have you. It really that's just something I do when somebody asks and offer me too much money to refuse. Sometimes comics can be a sort of a reasonably lucrative business, and sometimes it is not. And at those times, you're hoping that the ad guy comes calling, maybe. So,
right.
I don't know.
Right. So real quick before we get started, how did you get into wanting to draw comics, and what was your process of breaking in?
Well, I was always drawing from I was a wee nipper, and my mum and dad wanted to encourage it, I guess, and they brought home a copy of Avengers #8 when I was 4, I think, and that was it. I was just like smitten. And I said to my mum and dad after I'd looked at it, that's what I'm going to do when I grow up. Obviously, they were completely you know, like, yeah, you live at, you're a kid in Belfast, and these comics are made in America. How is that going to happen? But I just had my blinkers on and I persevered. And when I got to about 17 or 18, I realized I had to really do something about it. So I started submitting sample work to the various comic companies. If you look in the inside cover of any comic, they, in the Indicia area, the address of the there you go, the address of the comic company is there, and I would just make photocopies of my artwork and send it to the editor of the appropriate comic via that address. And it took me about 4 years of doing that, just plugging away, sending artwork pretty much every week to various different publishers all around the world, until I got my first gig. You know, I owned a comic shop in the meantime, and I also worked in a builder's yard and things like that to kind of supplement my income. Not that you would know I worked in a builder's yard looking at me these days, but yeah, so that, and then I got my first gig, and from there it was really that was it. But it was just a process of being so determined and never taking no for an answer.
Right.
Just any rejection I got, I tried to learn from it.
Right on. Well, let me ask you a couple things I want to just reference in the chat because you were laughing, just to inform everybody. That shirt is a Pi shirt, a Pi Day shirt from Jackson College, if you can't see it. So John got one of those when he was at Jackson College. Last time there is a video of John drawing a Black Panther from our last thing, and he did a bunch of work, and then he basically auctioned it off for students in need on campus. And so that was very nice of him. And we're going to do the same thing with this Frankenstein drawing. And so if you guys are interested in it, we'll be putting it up on the site at some point when we receive it, and we'll bid it, and it benefits students at Jackson College. And then also on there, Steve Tuckey really quickly threw up there Avengers #8. I'm not sure what the cover is. What will it be, John? Do you remember?
It's the Avengers versus Kang, as far as I recall.
Oh boy.
No, the thing is that in the UK, there were British reprints of the Marvel stuff. So sometimes they printed less of each issue. Oh God, it's far too. Anyway, yeah. It may not be American Avengers 8 cover, may not be the correct one.
Got you.
So I apologize.
I'm a Fantastic Four collector, so I see the Fantastico 4 or something. It's something like that, and it's a totally different cover. Colors are all different.
Sure.
Maybe the backgrounds have been stripped out, but really cool. And then also, I just want to check out before I want to ask you one more question about comics. But Alana Tuckey is saying, hey, if you guys want to buy some of those shirts, those benefit charity. So there's some shirts around as well. So if you want to get something from Alana, just you can probably email or contact us to get that information. My big question I want to ask before I get you drawing, because now I've put the pressure on you to finish this thing in like really short time, is that then you have a very old and close relationship with Garth Ennis, and if people are on the Zoom here, Garth Ennis is like the guy that did Preachers, become very famous writer. Can you just tell us about how you guys know each other and how you guys got to doing things?
Sure. Garth was in my brother's year at school, my younger brother, who's like 3-4 years younger than me. I didn't really know him at school. I knew of him and he knew of me. We were both into comics. And then when I opened my comic shop, Garth would come in to pick up his comics from me. And obviously when I was running my shop, I was starting to get little bits and pieces of work from various comic companies, little short stories for British Marvel and things like that. And Garth suggested that we work together. He had an idea for a story which was about the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and we pitched that to a UK company, and they took it. So that was how I really knew Garth, from my brother's year in school, and then running a comic shop that he bought his comics from.
And then you guys did the Demon together, right?
The Demon and Hitman, and so many comics that I can't remember them. And I worked on The Boys as well, which is the big smash hit TV show at the moment. So yeah, I've drawn a lot of stuff with Garth over the years.
Awesome. So last hint, and then we'll get right to the drawing, is that now what I hear is that you're doing a self-published book called The Mighty World of McCrea. And
Yes,
it's got new stuff, but it's also got some of your out of print rare stuff, some of that which is with Garth Ennis, right?
that's right. The book is basically just a retrospective, I guess, looking back at all my creator-owned work. I can't reprint my Spider-Man stories. Marvel
Right.
would be annoyed. But everything that I own, and I'm sort of putting it with new covers, and there's a new creator-owned story in each one. I'm doing 4 volumes of it because I have done quite a lot of creator-owned work over the years, and a lot of it's out of print or has been out of print for years. But also in the UK, we used to get at Christmas, we used to get these annuals that repackaged old comic strips, but they also put in puzzle pages and articles, interviews, and this sort of business. And those were my favorite things to get at Christmas. So I've tried to emulate that with it. So it's got lots of articles and puzzle pages and just daft stuff. And fun stuff to make it a little bit more than just a collection of my old comics. So it's a sort of a labor of love that I've done via Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter was reasonably successful. And the book is, I'll be getting the book back from the printer on Tuesday, and I'm trying to get it out to all the people who supported the Kickstarter before Christmas so that they can have their Christmas annual.
It sounds fantastic. I know that I supported the Kickstarter, and I'm excited to check it out. And then we'll give people in the audience information about if they like what they see, what you're doing, and enjoy the conversation, they might want to invest in one of those annuals. And we'll leave that information. And Professor Tuckey is going to collect addresses and forms and stuff. So if people want to get a chance at purchasing one, and John said, of course, he would sign it if you purchase one. So there's our ad. There's a little bit of background about John, but now we're going to get to the part. This is what he loves to do, is draw. And we contacted him because he said when he was here, he was a Marvel zombie. And I said, well, why don't you do a Marvel zombie? But instead, John suggested that he would do Frankenstein. So we're going to get to it.
Right. Okay. No, just you let me know when you can see what I've started with. First off, this is all the bits and pieces I'm going to be using in the drawing. So some of it, my media isn't exactly traditional. How is that?
That's grand.
You can see that, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Grand. So what I'm going to do normally, when I was doing a drawing like this, basically Frankenstein's monster. Now, this is the Frankenstein monster that I grew up reading, which is the Marvel version of Frankenstein's monster, who was created and drawn by Mike Ploog. I mean, created might be too strong a word, but his look was conceptualized by Mike Ploog, a very fantastic comic artist, who created a lot of stuff for Marvel, but various other things too. He's still going, Ploog, as well. He's an awesome artist. So I based it on Mike Ploog's design of, now normally when I've sketched it out roughly, because the pencil sketching isn't very clear through Zoom, so I'm just going to show you my inking process, but I'm going to sort of reverse it a little bit, because normally I would go in fine with my pen and start noodling with the fine lines, but because I'm going to put a lot of black down for the sky, I want to get the big black areas done first, so that it doesn't, so that I could give it time to dry, basically. So I'm just going to start by slapping down a lot of ink, and I put down a wash of water first, and then kind of splob on the water. As you can see, this might be why it needs time to dry, and it gives me nice sort of effects in the sky as well. This sort of by putting the water down first, the ink flows where the water goes, and but creates sort of interesting effects. So let's just do that, and really it's very casual sort of process.
It's roughing it in, right? Kind of.
Yeah, but you see, you get this sort of effect here where the ink is just sort of flowing into space. And I love this sort of stuff. It gives an idea of, it gives a feeling of sort of smoke or clouds or you know, that sort of thing. But it
Right.
takes forever to dry. So
Yeah.
that's sort of my background,
Beautiful.
black placed in.
And then you use a lot of, when stuff gets dry, and I've noticed you use a lot of like, I know, is it gesso or is it whiteout in order to put some
Yeah,
texture?
yeah. I use this Dr. Martin's bleed proof white.
Gotcha.
But so I'm going to go in with the heavy sort of, with a brush and the ink, and just put in all the big heavy areas first.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this. We kind of did the penciling first because it's a little bit softer, but it gives this nice kind of frame, and then you can get into looking at this this process here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes, it doesn't show up well on the camera, the penciling, so it's a little bit it's just not right for Zoom particularly.
Yeah,
Maybe my camera is crap. Oh, that's my daughter's camera, so I better not insult it too much. So
I think it's fine. No, it's good because the pencils are showing up real nice. So
okay.
is this how you usually
No, I'm sort of
work?
going reverse. I'm sort of reversing my technique here, like I said, to kind of to give the inks time to dry.
Right.
So it's
Well, I was going to ask, do you mostly usually work with a brush, or do you usually
no,
work? No.
it depends on how I feel, honestly, and on the subject matter. The brush I'm using here to kind of just give me the big areas and the big lines, and maybe for the more like the hair here,
Mm-hmm.
it's much nicer to go in with brush and get the
Mm-hmm.
effects of the hair, like so. I'm also going to use a toothbrush as well. Frankenstein's monster in the comic, he wears this big sort of bear skin overcoat jacket,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I use these smashed up toothbrushes, which I've cut bits out of and things, and I use them to get certain effects with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll show you, and I'm gonna just draw using the toothbrush and create his
So did you
bear.
come upon that through other artists, or just like
This
trial and error?
I just say trial and error. I'm not 100% sure if I can remember on this one. I mean, so much stuff you do pick up from other artists, and maybe sometimes you don't even remember where you got it from.
Gotcha.
But it's sort of it's a technique that can be quite random, and this is the thing. This is the beauty of stuff like this, is I love the randomness of it, just the potential to create something that you didn't realize you were going to create, but also and this is something you don't get with computer drawing, where I don't think, at least I'm not aware of, where you can make these happy mistakes. Actually, you probably can in computer drawing too. I'm just really thick when it comes to computers. So,
No. Well, it's really, or what you're trying to really say is it's a very organic process. And so,
yeah,
it just grows
it
from
is.
what you're doing there. Yeah. It's not,
Yeah.
you're putting an element of surprise in it for yourself even. Yeah.
Yes, so absolutely. Yes. And I mean, some of the nicest things I've drawn have been part of those sort of random errors that have occurred. But I mean, his jacket looks pretty
Wicked.
warm and toasty already. And I probably will use it to just draw a bit of it. He's got bandages in this arm, and I like to the brush is good for. I mean, the toothbrush is good for these sorts of effects too.
Right.
It gives a nice sort of random. The word, I keep using the word randomness when I'm using this, and I guess it sort of is that. And I'm going to go into his hair a little bit.
So when you said there's bits out, you've got different lengths, or you've just cut whole pieces out of the brush?
Oh, yeah, I don't know how clear it is, but you can see. Can you see against the white?
Tip it up towards your light. There you go.
Like that. You can see I've chiseled
Oh,
bits out.
I see. Yeah.
It's incredibly hard to actually cut bits out of a toothbrush, as it
Yeah,
turns out.
I don't know. That's why I was like, wow. There's a couple of questions based on this here, or inquiries. So like
Yep.
using that much black ink, is there a concern of it bleeding through or bleeding through the
Well,
whole page? Or
it would only be a concern if I had something of value on the back of it, but it's just on a, it's a blank pad. And if I
yeah.
lose a page behind it, say la vie. I mean,
All right.
that's, but that's fine.
And you're using like a thick bond of paper there, yeah?
It's about 200 GSM. So
Yeah.
it's relatively thick. So I'm
Thick.
just going to keep going with the brush to keep getting in these big shapes.
Cool. And as you're doing that, somebody's asking, do you plan out, or when you just start, is it more gestural how you come to your drawings? I mean, or combo, or
Again, it really depends on the drawing. Oh, the actual the pencil drawing of it.
yeah,
Um,
laying out, yeah.
it's very gestural, and probably because we're going to do that bit later on where I show you how I approach a figure, you'll see the way I go about sort of thinking about that as well. I mean, it starts out quite organic, and then I refine it as I go along with the figures.
Yeah.
So
It just
it's
starts tightening down, yeah, tightening down. And I recall
yep.
when you were doing the Black Panther drawing, which again, if
Mhm.
you guys want to check it out, it's on our website. It's kind of sped up because you probably spent about an hour, but I know you spent several hours later really dialing it up. It was very abstract because you had him on a branch, basically, if I remember right. And him kind
Well,
of
I was
posed on
going
a
to.
branch.
Yes, I was going to actually use a branch for this as well as an old
Ah,
stick, but the page, it's not big enough.
uh,
You need a bit of room when you start getting into sort of that sort of thing. I think the toothbrush is about as much as I can risk, really,
right on.
on this sort of thing. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I think I've got down all my big shapes.
They got
So,
somebody on here that just said, oh, Damian Rhodes says, I'm very structured myself, so the ability to accept randomness and elaborate upon the organic nature of the drawing is impressive.
oh, thanks. I think one of these, the sort of that comes with practice, I think, and just because you've got to have a certain amount of trust in your ability to save things if you screw up. And the more trust you have in your ability to be able to go in and fix it, the more it enables you to loosen up and just go with it, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
that comes with time. I couldn't have done a drawing using all these tools and equipment when I started out. I just wouldn't have had the nerve, I guess, or the sort of ability. I think it's taken years of just practicing and and um, and just getting comfortable with my own stuff to the point where I feel happy when I do something very random that you can make something of it. So if that
Yeah,
makes
that
any
makes a
sense
lot of
at
sense
all.
because
Unfortunately,
the next question was just like that. Oh, how do you do something if you really screw up with the black? So you just
well,
kind of intuitively answered it.
yes, I mean, sometimes I throw stuff away. It does happen, where I do something and it just doesn't work. And sometimes you've just got to accept that that's that. But most of the time, I don't, and I think it's just a matter of having a bit of faith in your ability to sort of claw yourself out of any sort of random mistakes you may have made, or mistakes you may have made with your art. So now I am just using a standard sort of 0.3 pen to go in and do little fine details while I wait. And I'm desperately working around all this blotty ink and trying to make sure I don't like stick my hand in it and smudge it everywhere.
So can I just ask you, because, so
Yeah.
what do you say, if there are artists on this call, because I'm not sure how many people are artists or if they're writers or what, but how did you work up the chops to do this? Like, what would you say your process has been in learning?
Just drawing all the time. I mean, it doesn't get any easier. And looking at other people and trying to analyze how they've done things, and just seeing the sort of sheer nerve that some artists have putting things down and wanting to be to have that. So it's just a matter of I think just practice, getting yourself to a point where you're confident in your own drawing ability, uh, and then starting to experiment and just going, oh well, what happens if I do this, or what happens if I do that, and just seeing where it takes you, so that's it's not a quick process.
Yeah.
It's something, I've been drawing professionally for 35 years now. So,
When you're only 30, how can you draw? I've been drawing for 35 years, John, if you're only 30.
you're just a beautiful person for lying to me like that. Just
I'm trying to be beautiful. And so
yes.
down here in the some other questions we've got here is I think they're combined, but when you were younger, did you do more formalized anatomy, like the Bridgman stuff, or did you just kind of
I mean,
from comics, or what did you do?
Well, when you say young, I mean, all I ever did was comics, looked at comics and copied from comics when I was a kid. I discovered Bridgman because of I met a guy called Carl Potts who's a comic artist and editor.
Yeah.
I met him at a UK comic convention I think it was around 85 or something like that. For my first ever convention. And I took my portfolio along and he looked at it and he gave me a Marvel tryout, which was paid, by the way. Marvel used to pay you to do the tryouts, and it was a Vision story. I remember it very well. And I sent it in, and he was very good, but brutal in his takedown of my art. I mean, to a degree, I understand why he didn't. You've got to be, you can't be thin-skinned when you're an artist. You've got to be able to take a criticism, because you're basically putting your artwork out there for everyone to see, and people aren't going to like it. Not everybody, you cannot please everyone. So he critiqued my stuff in a rather brutal way, but at the same time, it was really great critique of my work. And he also sent me a lot of reference material to learn from. And that was how I discovered Bridgman, because he sent me copies of some of the Bridgman books. Of course, I went out and bought them after that. But that's how I got turned on. This was back when Marvel and DC and things actually had somebody who would look at your work and actually what's the word, and respond. I don't think editors at any of the companies have time for that these days. It's mainly done through comic conventions and meeting people in person. So,
hey, John, Jimmy Palmiotti just signed on.
Did he indeed? Right there, Jimmy. Oh, good Lord. Well,
how's it going, buddy?
We just keep checking up the pressure, bro.
No pressure.
Don't screw up.
Yeah. God, Jesus. Thanks, Jimmy. How you doing, man?
All right, pretty good. How are you?
I am fine, Jimmy, or at least I was until a few seconds ago, and now I've got you watching me draw.
Oh, please, come on.
Slightly terrified.
Hey, so John, so thanks for signing on, Jimmy. I'm going to throw down another question in the chat. Somebody's asking, do you draw from like a knowledge of what you think the character is like, or what you imagine them to be, or when you approach, how do you approach?
You use the mirror in front of you?
For this one, Jimmy, you know it, but It's I think like anybody, you want it to look like the character, but at the same time, you want to bring your take to it, and it's one of those balancing acts where you don't want to disrespect the character, but at the same time you want to put your stamp on it. So yeah, you try to follow the guidelines, but at the same time you try to bring your own little twist to it. When you're working on any character, I think the only character where I really deviated quite strongly from it was the demon, which you mentioned earlier. And honestly, if I was doing it now, if I was drawing the demon now, I would be much more respectful. But back then I was a young guy and I didn't really like the look of the demon particularly, which is sort of sacrilege, I think.
It's okay
these days. So I changed him quite a lot. But I think to do that to Kirby is a bit maybe a bit much. I don't know.
Well, you made him more like a drooling. So for people who don't know what he's talking about, there's the demon, which is a character from the 70s that Jack Kirby basically made up, and it's based on a character. The look is based on a character from the 1920s Swedish film, which I'm not going to remember the title, but also copied in Prince Valiant and by the artist of Prince Valiant. And Kirby really did it more as the guardian of Merlin's guardian pet kind of. And then John went for a much more savage approach. Drooling, bubbling, very thin and lean, kind of really bestial, versus like he was also real popular in Swamp Thing in the 80s, which John did, not Stephen Bissette kind of did a weird take on him too, but more looking like the Kirby guy. But
Bissette's stuff was absolutely fantastic.
And then Wagner kind of took another turn on it. Miniseries.
Oh,
but yeah, you kind of made the more savage, drooling, manic demon, right?
I think that's what my state of mind was back then, at any rate. So that's perhaps where that came from.
So what I was going to ask you is, down here, I think you've referred to it, but we could do more about like your main folks that you follow. What in the comic world? We just talked about Kirby, and you and I have talked about Ditko. Who is it that you really looked for style and looked up to, and kind of?
When I was a kid.
Well, I mean, even now too. Yeah, whenever.
Well, these days, there's a lot of really amazing artists about. I mean, far too many almost to name. It's ridiculous how many good artists there are, and slightly terrifying, quite frankly. And so many of them are so young. But I don't know. I think one of my favorite artists at the moment is a guy called Eric Canetti, who has he hasn't drawn that many comics, but I think he works more in animation and character design and things. But when he does draw, and he does a lot on Instagram, and posts a lot on there. And his take on characters is so he just approaches things from an angle that a lot of the time I wonder where it comes from. And his design sense is so fantastic that it sort of staggers me sometimes. And so yeah, guys like him, and geez, when you get put in the spot, it's
no worries.
And John, it looks like Pablo Marcos a little bit on the face.
Well, that's good. I met Pablo Marcos not long ago. Well, back before conventions ceased. He was in a Canadian convention, and I met him there and got to geek out a little bit. He was sitting right beside me at the show. But yeah, I loved Pablo's stuff on Conan and Iron Jaw and things like that. And you take everything, don't you? You take from everything, and you don't necessarily realize it, do you, at the time, that those things are sinking into your psyche. But there they are. Then you're drawing 30 years later or something, and it sort of appears. But I had sort of tried to base this more on Plug, but I know.
Man. I see it.
Yeah, but of course I've just gone all scrappy as hell.
That's good. No, we like it. I was going to say, you know, you and I have talked about before, because we were talking about just the entry into kind of your thing was mostly superheroes, but you know, we're about doing horror, reanimation, zombies.
Yep.
What did you really get into there? And I can see this because like this guy became a part of Legion of Monsters, right?
Yeah.
Mummy and then Frankenstein. This Frankenstein, they just did a Punisher thing maybe 4 years ago, where he became this character basically.
Gotcha.
So I'm just wondering what kind of horror stuff did you get into, and what kind of drew you to some of this horror element?
Well, I mean, like any kids, I think, I watched horror movies when I could, sort of snuck down to the VHS library and rented out things while trying to pretend to be Vincent Adult Man or what have you. And that was, so I watched things like Driller Killer and whatnot, and Night of the no, not Night of the Demon, but anyway, various sort of very unsalubrious horror movies. I mean, quite frankly, I can't stand horror anymore. As I've got older and since having kids, anything with a horrific element in it, kind of just, I can't stand it. I'm pitiful these days when it comes to horror. But I used to really enjoy all that Evil Dead and things like Sam Raimi's stuff. Things like that were always.
Well, yeah, right. Evil Dead was banned in England, right? Evil Dead was banned in England for a long time, I think.
God, was it really?
Yeah, man.
We had some of the worst people. So it was.
What about in comics? Did you enjoy any horror comics?
All of them. I read Dracula was really popular in the UK, and British Marvel reprinted Dracula Lives as a book, and then it had like the zombie stories at the back of it.
So you're saying Tomb of Dracula? Tomb of Dracula?
Pardon? Well, it was
Dracula?
It was called Tomb of Dracula for you guys, but for us, it was renamed as Dracula Lives. So I don't know 100% know why. So, but there it is, and so I bought that as well with all my superhero books, and I do have a real fondness for those old Marvel black and white horror books, which they did a run of with. The zombie and Dracula and such like in them, and they were great. And I mean, I think out of all and I read the Plug Frankenstein books as well. So I think out of all the Marvel characters that are about now, it's the horror ones that interest me the most, probably because of my style more than anything else, because I sort of fit them better than superheroes, which is weird. I was a huge superhero fan and I still am, but my style has sort of become much less superhero-y over the years. And I'm not sure if that was the influence of things like 2000 AD as well, on British.
So what do you mean? You mean because it's like less? What would you say that? What do you mean by that then?
Well, 2000 AD is was a British comic. It's a British comic, a very anarchic sort of sci-fi book, and it didn't pull any punches, and it's none of the art in it certainly. Guys like Brian Bolland came from 2000, and Brian's a consummate sort of artist, but everybody else like Kevin O'Neill, Mick McMahon, Cam Kennedy, those sorts of artists.
More rough art, more like just, a kind of an art outsider, rougher art kind of.
Yeah, they're just much more brutal in their approach. They don't sort of worry about everything being lovely and perfect and anatomy being exactly right and things. And it lends itself much more to the sort of to this sort of work, to the horror genre. So, I mean, Kevin O'Neill is the only guy who got his style banned by the Comics Code.
I know.
his entire
so
style
nasty.
was banned by the Comics Code, which is, there must be a badge of honor.
He got the last. He got the last laugh anyway.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, yeah,
for sure.
Hey,
I got a
John,
couple other.
I got a quick question. Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, John, right about now is when Pablo would take out the toothbrush and put a light gray in and start splattering it.
Yeah. Well, I've used the toothbrush for the. I've used my toothbrushes for the bear coat.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It looks good.
Bear coat.
Yeah, man.
And then I probably will do a little bit of, because there's going to be snowfall.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'm going to put in a bit of snowfall, and I'll probably do a little bit of the old flicky toothbrush too.
Gotcha. I don't want to interrupt. I'm just watching. I'm sorry about that, guys.
No, Jesus.
You're all right, man. So here's what I want to do is I want to throw back into the chat if we can real quick. And let me make sure I get up here. So there's some stuff asking about, I think we'll save this one to the end because it's a little bit more involved, but we'll get back to the one about self-publishing versus the comic industry.
Right. That's it. Yes.
Like in your books, the people are just saying, how closely would you work with a writer?
It depends. It totally depends on the writer and how much they want me to be involved in the process.
Well, let's say with Jerry. Let's use Jerry Duggan as a example.
With the book we did, Dead Eyes, I did have quite a lot of influence on how I wanted it to go. And I worked with Jerry on how the character should be as a person, before he started writing the scripts. But when it got down to just doing the actual script work and actually producing the comic, I pretty much stepped aside and let him get on with it. I think, there's a time when, most artists are pretty busy and desperately struggling to keep up. So, because it's just a laborious and process altogether, producing a full comic. So, if we can avoid any extra work, a lot of us try to do that. Yes.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Not wanting to sound like a complete asshole or anything, but that is sort of the case.
Well, let me ask you this: like that Dead Eyes, which you did kind of together.
Yep.
What was the process like when, say, like working on the Yondu book that you just did? For people that I'm asking, that's the Guardians of the Galaxy character, and you just did a mini series with that.
Yeah, I had no input on the story at all. That's working for Marvel, and everything's very much got a demarcation. When you work for Marvel, it's you're a penciler or an inker. The writer is a writer, the editor is an editor, the colors, and it's rare that it would be allowed that I would have any influence on that. Also, Marvel's deadlines are usually awful, so there's just you just hit the ground running a lot of the time. So I'm just putting in a bit of snow now.
Cool. Like, just to kind of extend on that, though, like, say, well, I've read stuff where Alan Moore, right, is working with Eddie Campbell. Specifically, I'm thinking of From Hell. And Eddie would just be like, this is a great script, Alan, but it doesn't work. I mean, he wouldn't even tell me. He'd just start changing stuff, which I thought was pretty gutsy. I mean, have you done that? Like, just said, that shot's not going to work. I'm going to have to change it to fit this or that.
Yeah, I've changed some things, but I never do it without asking. At least I don't think I do. Jimmy, did I ever change any of your stuff without asking?
If you did, you only made it better. So I'm not worried about it.
Oh God. Right. But I mean, I would never really, I'm not a professional writer by any stretch of the imagination. I would never change a plot or the way the plot works without asking. I think it'd be pretty rude of me not to do that. And so, yeah, that would be that'd be something where I would be very cautious.
I wish you,
And
I wish you changed Superboy into Batman. It would have sold better.
Oh yeah, if I'd done that, that would have worked, wouldn't it, Jimmy? I think that you should have had words with Dan about that. I mean, more than don't
Hey,
put
let
it
me
all
throw this
parking
one
on
at you. We
me,
got a
Jimmy.
question from Elizabeth that just says, I've seen different items you have drawn from Imperial War History, Marvel,
Oh
and
yeah.
Time Out magazine. She's asking, are the majority of your drawings done based on your own ideas or what they're asking you to draw?
Oh, most of the time it's what they're asking me to draw. That I'm not an artist as such. I'm a an illustrator, and people hire me to illustrate their ideas, which is just that's the way of it. And I'm happy with that most of the time. I mean, obviously, I've ended up working in some real dogs of things where I've just gone, oh God, this is terrible, but whatever, and carried on regardless.
Why are you talking about that drawing I asked you to do? That's terrible that you'd say such a thing. I'm just kidding. No, but so say like this, I'd love to extend on that idea. So for you, what do you like to draw?
Well,
I mean, if you don't have to do stuff for other people, what do you draw for yourself?
Oh God. Well, I mean, I have done quite a bit of drawing for myself recently, which has been nice. But a lot of the time, I'm just drawing my favorite characters, and just I've done a lot of 2000 AD drawings recently of various 2000 characters, just because I've really enjoyed the sort of visiting these old characters that I've never had a chance to draw. Mainly because most of them are dead, and that because that's the way 2000 AD works. They kill a lot of their characters, which is which is good, because then you don't get this ridiculous bogged down continuity. But at the same time, it means that newbies like me don't have a chance to draw various characters. So yeah, I've been just having fun and drawing some of my favorite 2000 AD characters recently. But
who was that for you?
Well, I drew Fergie, who was just recent. In fact, he's just here. I just drew Fergie there, which is he's called the King of the Big Smelly, and basically he was the guy who lived down in the sewers and ran the sewers underneath Megacity, and he appeared in the Judge Caligula storyline way back when I was a kid reading 2000. So yeah, I've never had a chance. He died a glorious death towards the end of that storyline. So I'm never going to get a chance to draw him, except if I draw him just for fun. So yeah, that's what I've been doing.
Hey,
really.
so they want to know. Somebody wants to know. I think I'm going to say the name wrong, so please forgive me. Talon or Talene, she or he, because I don't know either. Is just saying that you had mentioned that the boys that you did some work on the boys with Garth.
Yep.
And then they're just wondering, have you done any work on actual storyboards for any of shows or any cartoons or anything like that? And maybe
no. Well, yes, but nothing that ever got made. I've done various little bits and pieces here and there for stuff, but nothing that ever actually got made at the end of it. That's sort of Hollywood to a degree, I guess. There's a lot of stuff.
Ideas, right?
Yeah. I mean, just recently I got hired. Oh, I'm not actually. I don't think I can talk about this.
Don't say it.
No, I'm not going to say it. I was just about to give an example, and then I realized that perhaps I might have signed an NDA, so I better shut my mouth.
There you go. Well, I'll bail you out of it. So if you haven't worked on those, but like say you're just relation to those material, like the boys or like, Guardians of the Galaxy, what effect does that have on your I don't know, as your work as an artist? Does it lead to more people like asking for boys oriented stuff or
oh God, yeah,
Galaxy, or do you get a lot more attention because people are like, hey, who's this dude? And then so can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, to a degree, I mean, if the boys, since it's become a TV show, I've had to do some advertising work for it. which has been nice. And the sorry, but I mean, I guess maybe it does bring some more people to the table at a show, because you've done that. It doesn't make you any more money, that's for sure. Unless you, I mean, I wasn't Derek Robertson was Garth's co-creator on The Boys, so right. I didn't create the characters. I just worked on them as a work for hire guy, and that's fine. I got paid well for it, and I get royalties. The books sell better when the TV show does well. So from that point of view, yes, it's good, that aspect of things.
Okay, well, I'm being reminded. Are you okay with going a few minutes past 2, because we're at 7 till? Are you okay with that, John?
I'm a comic artist. I'm completely used to ruining my deadlines.
Oh, good, perfect. Well, we're staying on task.
That's all
Yeah,
I ever do.
I'm gonna split, John. I just wanted to say take care.
Jimmy, thanks for stopping by. Lovely to hear from you.
Yeah, Amanda's here too. Say hi to John.
Hey, John, how are you?
Oh, Amanda. I was just about to say, pass on my love to Amanda. Good to hear from you, Amanda. How are you doing, my dear?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing? It looks like you're doing quite well.
I'm doing all right, Amanda. You know, surviving under the circumstances.
Are you wearing pants right now?
Yes, Jimmy, never when you're about. they just vanish. I don't understand what's going on.
I was going to lead with that earlier. I was just like, make sure that part of the Zoom etiquette is everybody's wearing pants.
Okay, right, okay.
Just in case you have to get up to go to the bathroom, at least turn the camera off, would you?
Yeah.
So,
all right, guys. Well, take care, guys. Take care, John. Take care, everybody. John, Stephen, all those guys. Take care.
Love
Thanks
you
for dropping
too.
by, you guys. Appreciate it.
Take it easy. Bye.
Cool. Hey, so John, here's a couple other things from the chat, not the long one, because we'll save that for right at the end because it's involved.
Yep.
They're just saying, because you have a son and daughter, I think. Are either of your kids going to go into art? Have they shown any interest in art?
They all showed interest in art. I've got 3.
You got 3, I forgot. Okay.
Two boys and a girl, and my 2 boys were mad artists when they were younger. Here's this bit where the flicky toothbrush Jimmy was talking about earlier, which you dip a bit of water and then kind of flick the toothbrush.
Okay. Right. So it's kind of interrupting the spots where it's going on.
Yeah, and it gives it a hazy look. And for a snowy background, it looks like the little bits of snow in the distance. So, and you can get sort of mucky with it and just go in there. And it just sort of knocks everything back a bit.
Somebody said that the flicky toothbrush is your favorite bit, their favorite bit. Question from Sierra. What's your preferred medium to create in?
Well, pen and ink in general. Pen and ink with a bit and whiteout. I painted a lot of comics when I was starting out in comics because that was the thing back then. Back in the 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of painted comics. Bill Sienkiewicz and guys like that. Mm-hmm. And Simon Bisley were doing their thing. So John J. Muth, those sorts of guys were all working in comics. So the painted comics were the big thing. I had never painted in my life. And the first, I think, maybe 500 or 600 pages of artwork I did in comics were all fully painted. And it was really tough because I didn't know how to paint. So I had to learn on the job. And by the end of it, I was a pretty decent painter, but I don't enjoy it. And I never got into comics to paint. I got into comics to be a black and white artist. Though you could say to a degree, there's a certain amount of painting going on here. But yeah, pen and ink really is my favorite as far as working in comics goes. Yeah,
So
yeah.
what-
Pencil,
tell me about
pen.
that. I haven't seen Dark Days. Is that what it's called?
Pardon?
You know your early stuff with Garth. It was called Dark Days,
Troubled Souls.
Troubled Souls. Was that painted?
Yep.
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 That's
It
what I
was. And I mean, if you go back and look at that, you can literally see me learning from page to page. You can literally see me sort of going, oh, this is how this bit works. This is how acrylic paint works. Oh, right, right, and just sort of staggering my way through the process. It was sort of a brutal way to learn in front of people, but hey, this is it. This is what you do.
It was
So,
work, yeah. That's
yeah, it was work, and I was
kind of,
breaking into comics, and I was just happy to be getting the work. Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
just kind of a right, kind of a naked process. It's just like people can
Oh,
see what you're
geez.
doing. Yeah,
Yeah, that was raw, raw. That was raw.
for sure. But that's good though. And now can you tell us like is something like that gonna be in those new Mighty World
Troubled
of
Souls?
McCrea? Yeah.
No, Troubled Souls isn't in there. Partly because we own it. Garth and I own it, but Garth is not that big a fan of it anymore. So I think I didn't I honestly didn't even ask about Troubled Souls. I kind of
Oh.
and it's
I know that that thing is very hard to find and it's
that is
very
true.
expensive
It's
if you
true.
want to get a hold of it. I was just curious. So tell us about a little bit of what are some of the older out of print things that are be appearing in there?
Well, the first volume has The Atheist, which was by Phil Hester and myself,
Oh, yeah.
which was
Love me some
published.
Phil Hester. Oh, love me some
Yeah.
Phil.
Oh well, Phil's a genius, and so The Atheist. Garth and I did a comic strip called The Toss Pot 4, which is going to be in there as well, and it's brilliant. Not, but so I'm going.
Okay.
Along with things like two more Phil Hester comics called Progenitor, which I think is still a working title, which was originally sort of serialized in David Lloyd's
Aces.
Aces Weekly. Unfortunately, but unfortunately it was never finished. So I'm going to finish it.
Sweet.
And also there was a thing called War Paint by Phil and myself, which was for a British anthology book that folded after a while, and that's not finished either. So I'm going to finish that too. So yeah, plus just lots and lots of little one-shot stories that I've done over the years for various publications and books and things. Plus the new stuff, like Jerry Duggan and myself have a new story in this first one called Rocket Station Charlie, which
awesome.
and you see the first like 8 or so pages of that, and then that will get finished off later as a Kickstarter, I think. And there's new Dead Eyes content as well, and each volume will have a new creator-owned book, not necessarily by Jerry and myself, though I think the second one will also be by Jerry, but I also might try and work with other people and create new characters and concepts in the later volumes.
Awesome.
So yeah.
And I was just going to aside from people, Jerry Duggan's the guy, one of the inventors of Deadpool. So if you like Deadpool, you probably enjoy some of the other things that are in this book.
Jerry. Yeah, Jerry's written more Deadpool pages than anyone else, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sweet. Okay, let's go. Before if you're cool, we'll still do that gestural drawing. But before we do that, I had the long question that I wanted to ask you, so you could actually
Okay. I might as well turn back to camera if I'm going to be talking.
Yeah, yeah.
I suppose.
This one's a long one, and I mean it's a long of idea, I guess. Maybe I think it is, but Antonio asked, how do you think the comic book industry would have developed if self-publishing and or web comics had been available during the formative years of the industry?
Oh, well,
It's kind of a rich question.
I think, sorry, I'm just trying to, why is my stand deciding to give up on me? It's just drooping. My
It's just like,
stand is
oh,
drooping.
I've had too much to do today.
Yeah, I'm going to lean back, I suppose.
Okay.
I think it probably things would have happened the way they are happening now, to a degree. You would have had less control of by big companies. Maybe Marvel and DC wouldn't own as many big name characters, things like that. They would be still owned by their creators. Whether or not that's a good thing for the character I mean, for the creator. Oh no, for the character is questionable. You know, if that's one thing you can say for a big company is they're always going to keep trying to exploit a character and push him out there and get other people drawing it. And you know, you wonder if a character had been created, like Spider-Man had been created and then owned by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and not Marvel, what would have happened to Spider-Man, especially with somebody like Ditko, who might have, who's a little bit, I mean, most artists are a little bit sometimes and writers. So whether or not they would have been wanted their character to be drawn by anybody else or what have you.
Yeah.
So would Spider-Man have become such a huge household name? Possibly not. So from that point of view, maybe you know, Disney, Marvel owning these characters is a good thing because you get these to see these characters develop. But at the same time, it would have been nice for the writers and artists of a lot of these things to get better payback for their creations, and maybe they could have done that if they owned them.
Maybe
you know,
like a bigger diversity of content too, right? I mean,
possibly, yeah. I mean, yeah, but well, I mean, back in the 40s and 50s, there was quite a lot of diverse content. You know, you had romance books and you had war books and you had westerns and all this sort of business, which to a degree dried up when the superheroes came along and just sort of took over. But they're coming back now. So you know, with the advent of self-publishing and things, and the sort of manga opening up the market in America and the UK to other readers and making, you know, well, women, basically, you know, and bringing more people, more diverse people into the readership and thus creating more diverse books. So that can only be a good thing. But yeah, it's you know, that's a tough question to answer.
I mean, yeah, I was like, I don't think you want to be drawn to talk about this thing. Then my other one before we get on to that is that we just had one. What is your, you know, couple of your favorite projects that you've ever worked on?
Well, I think the character I'm most well known for is a character called Hitman, which I created with Garth Ennis, and it lasted for 60 issues, which was 5 years of work. And I drew it all, I think. Maybe one issue. There was one issue I didn't draw, which is a shame. But it's my biggest body of work, and I think it's the character most people remember me for. So I do feel that Hitman is probably the thing that I have most fondness for, because I really lived those characters for so long. You know, but again, something like Dead Eyes, the book I've created with Jerry, is such a great character, and such a great character that I do love him as well. We've just had various glitches and problems in actually getting more Dead Eyes comics out into the world, unfortunately.
Right on. Okay, well, yeah, that's grand. I think we're caught up on them. I think we're pretty much caught up. Oh, except now there's 4 new ones. But do you want to just do a real quick test roll?
Yep.
And then if we have a few more comics, we can finish up. Now they're starting to argue, and this is a classic fanboy thing and fangirl thing. They're asking, who would win in between Superman and Batman. They're arguing about it. All I gotta say is, see, for me, my reference is go see Dark Knight Returns. That'll answer your question.
I'm not going to get involved in that one.
I think we can all agree Martha wins.
There you go.
Martha.
Martha. Okay, as far as gestural drawings go, or how I would start by drawing a characters, first thing I try to think of is its position on the page, and I always try to have movement in my figures, even if they're just standing. So there's a thing called the sort of, it's not really a rule, it's just a kind of 30-degree rule where you always try to have a line that's a sort of 30-degree to the upright, 30-degree, where that your runs through your figure to give it sort of movement. So if you think about that, and then I start with just drawing in the general egg shape of the head, and then I try to just think loosely of the torso, which is kind of a big thing, and then the waist, shoulders, and I keep it very flowing, and then you always try to get a bit of movement into the pelvis, where there's a leg coming down there, and then there's your other shoulder, and
so I mean, there's a lot going on here, because I think that people that don't draw, but you're kind of going off of basic shapes here, right, and connecting.
Yeah, your basic shapes are a kind of the sort of cuboid chest for the chest area. Then there's a kind of the spine comes down and hits the pelvis, which is basically a sort of a triangular shape. And then running off of the pelvis, you've got the legs, and the same up here with the arms. They just drop down off the shoulders there. But you can see the way there's that sort of angle, and then you've got this line running through it as well. So you've got these sort of, which prevents the figure from ending up looking like an action man, just sort of sitting there doing nothing. So this is where you get to in drawing a figure, if you've been drawing figures for years and years and years. I suppose when you're thinking about just breaking it all down, you would start with your proportions on the page, and that's usually for a character. It's usually there's about 7 heads going into the body. So you have the upper torso, which is kind of a trapezoid shape like that. You've got your spine, which is the waist, and then you would have a triangular pelvis area, and then you drop the legs off of that. There's a very good book called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, which is drawn by John McCrea, who's one of the all-time great Marvel artists. And it really breaks down dynamic figure drawing, and shows you how to do.
So is this the same as if you were starting for any figure, male or female figure?
Well, with a female figure, you might elongate the legs and narrow the torso, maybe lengthen the neck a bit, maybe make the shoulders less broad. It depends on the character. If you're drawing She-Hulk, maybe not. If you're drawing the Invisible Woman, maybe you do. So yes, but the general rule for a woman is just to narrow the shoulders, wider hips. And lengthen the legs, maybe, just to give it. But you get those. You're getting into these are superhero proportions, of course, and then when you have to draw, when you draw ordinary people, well, even in comics, ordinary people tend to look almost super heroic. unless you get into the really sort of short, if you're going for somebody particularly short or what have you.
Yeah, if you're drawing MODOK,
Yeah, or you're drawing MODOK or something. Yes,
If you're drawing
exactly.
MODOK, it's way different.
Yes. But
Very cool.
another way to think of drawing figures is the cylinders and squares or cubes approach, which again is you draw everything like in actual 3D. You draw the legs.
Oh yeah, all
cylinders.
dimensional. I see.
Yeah, and try to and think about it like that first and then you start to draw over the top of the basic shape and break it down. But that's going back to real basics. And it is covered in the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way as well. But yeah, that's as far as my own drawing goes, I do sort of my work starts out very gestural and very loose, and I just try to feel the flow of the figure and think about how its weight and how it sits or in the environment it's in. There's nothing worse than somebody having drawn a character and them looking like they're floating above the ground, unless of course they're like Miss Marvel or somebody and they are meant to be floating above the ground. But you want your character to feel like it's actually got a volume and a weight to it, and it's actually planted on the ground. And to do that, you have to understand about the flow and the weight and the balance of the character. So and again, this is all practice and just working away and practicing with your drawing. I've had many people ask me over the years, how do you get so good at drawing at conventions and things? And there's when I say it, you just have to draw a whole lot all the time. And eventually it's like anything. If I had picked up a violin when I was younger and started practicing, and I'd put in the amount of hours that I put in on the violin as I had in drawing, I'd probably be a pretty decent violinist by now. I might not be concert quality, but I might be pretty.
You'd be way better than most people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Walter Mosley said the same thing. He's like, if you want to write, you just have to write. You have to make time for it. And he's like, getting things on the page is important. And even if it's not perfect or it's not the final product you want, it's better out there than just like sitting thinking about it. And so the more that you kind of get into the creative process, the more it feeds into some kind of what your style and your work, right? So
exactly. If you don't, I know a bunch of people who very talented artists, but because they don't finish things and don't get the job done and move on to the next thing, they kind of stagnate and they don't improve. Their work doesn't change, and it's just about continually producing in anything. The more you draw, the more you paint, the more you sculpt, the more you write, the better you will become. The more you play, the better you will become. So
for real.
That's
well, hey, John, I want to thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you giving us the extra time. You've been a great person. Been great talking with you, man. I realized through this whole thing how much I missed talking with you and how generous you are with your time.
Oh, it's not a problem.
Thank you so much for answering. And we had, I think, about between 40 to 30 and 40 people the whole time. So just a last shout out to everybody for coming, man. Thank you so much for being here. This will be on our website or Facebook page. There is the form that if you are interested in getting a book from John, if you want to order a book from John, it'll be there. Of course, we'll house that there. We'll keep promoting John's work throughout the whole thing. This is just the beginning. We're so thankful to be able to have somebody this quality with us as our very first guest. So
Oh,
thanks.
well,
Thank you so
my
much,
pleasure,
John.
and that's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and thanks everybody for coming in and watching and taking part. It's been fun. It's been fun, and I'll get this Frankenstein's monster tidied up, and when it's dried, I'll get it posted out sometime this week to you guys, and you can auction it as you wish.
Thanks, John. And yeah, and if anybody gonna be looking for it, we're gonna put it out there. So and it goes to students in need on campus. I don't ever remember the name of the foundation, and these guys always laugh at me, but
Harriet Meyer
the Harriet Meyer
Fund.
fund,
Okay.
and it'll benefit them. So John, man, thank you so very much, man.
My pleasure.
Good health and good weather to you over there. At least maybe you'll have one.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
Say
certainly
hi.
the weather's not there. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Say hi
Thanks
to your
very
family
much,
for
guys.
us. Tell us thank you for their time, man.
Yeah,
See you
appreciate it. And thanks very much for setting it all up and making it run so smoothly, guys. And thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it and asking the questions. Okay.
Thanks, John.
Have a great day. Okay.
right,
All the best, guys. Bye.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
See ya. All right, everybody, stop recording. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we really appreciate it. Look for our